Welcome back to Autistically Accurate, where I aspirationally aim for autistical accuracy. My Pensieve episode 65. Islamic Opportunism and the Appropriation of Palestine, a Critical Analysis. Throughout history, Islam's expansion has been marked by a pattern of conquest, appropriation, and the imposition of a foreign religious narrative on diverse cultures. Nowhere is this more evident than in its claims over Palestine, particularly Jerusalem. As historical records and theological analysis demonstrate, Islam's relationship with this region reflects opportunistic behavior rather than legitimate spiritual inheritance. Drawing on arguments from scholars such as Dr. David Wood, this essay explores how Islam has borrowed, distorted, and weaponized religious narratives to justify its territorial ambitions, while suppressing dissent and diversity in its wake. 1. Borrowed narratives and theological distortions. Islam's foundational texts reveal an extensive borrowing from Jewish and Christian traditions. The Quran incorporates figures such as Abraham, Moses, and Jesus but fundamentally alters their roles to fit its theological framework. As Dr. David Wood highlights, these alterations often strip away critical context and deeper meaning, resulting in a fragmented and incoherent narrative. For example, Jesus is portrayed as a prophet rather than the Son of God, denying his crucifixion, Surah 4:157, and resurrection. This distortion undermines the central message of Christianity, replacing it with a narrative that is incompatible with historical and theological evidence. Similarly, the Quran's misunderstanding of the Trinity as God, Jesus, and Mary, Surah 5:116, exposes Muhammad's limited knowledge of Christian doctrine. The claim to Jerusalem follows a similar pattern. The Isra and Miraj story, in which Muhammad supposedly ascends to heaven from the farthest mosque, retroactively ties Islam to a city that was never part of its original sphere of influence. This narrative, written decades after Muhammad's death, is a transparent attempt to anchor Islam in the sacred geography of its more established neighbors. As Dr. Wood illustrates, Islam's portrayal of Jesus and its claim to Jerusalem are examples of theological opportunism. By co-opting and distorting existing narratives, Islam seeks legitimacy while erasing the original spiritual heritage of these traditions. 2. Territorial ambitions cloaked in religion. The Islamic claim to Jerusalem is not merely theological but deeply political. Following the Arab conquest of the Levant in the 7th century, Jerusalem became a symbol of Islamic dominance rather than a genuine center of faith. The construction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount was a deliberate act of replacing Jewish and Christian sacred sites with Islamic structures. Dr. Wood argues that such actions reflect Islam's broader strategy of conquest and cultural erasure. Surah 929 commands Muslims to fight non-believers until they submit to Islamic rule, a directive that has fueled centuries of territorial expansion. The treatment of non-Muslims in conquered lands, forced conversions, heavy taxation, jizya, and restrictions on religious practices, further demonstrates Islam's incompatibility with pluralism and coexistence. Dr. Wood's analysis highlights how the appropriation of Jerusalem mirrors Islam's expansionist impulse, where religious justification is used to legitimize territorial and cultural domination. 3. The cult of submission and ideological control. Central to Islam's theological framework is the concept of submission. Islam itself means submission. This is not limited to submission to Allah but extends to submission to Islamic authority. Dr. Wood frequently critiques the oppressive mechanisms by which Islam enforces conformity, including apostasy laws and blasphemy laws that punish dissent with death. For Palestinians and other non-Arabs, this has created a paradoxical relationship with Islam. While Islam claims to champion Palestinian rights, it simultaneously suppresses their cultural and religious identities under the banner of pan-Islamic unity. The Palestinian cause has been co-opted by Arab states and Islamic movements to serve broader geopolitical agendas, often at the expense of Palestinian autonomy. As Dr. Wood notes, Islam's emphasis on submission creates a system where dissent is not tolerated, reducing individuals and cultures to tools of an ideological machine. This dynamic is evident in the co-optation of the Palestinian struggle, where genuine grievances are overshadowed by broader Islamic ambitions. 4. Incompatibility with freedom and truth. Islam's approach to history and theology mirrors the tactics of modern authoritarian ideologies. By redefining terms and claiming what is not theirs, Islamic narratives manipulate reality to fit their agenda. Dr. Wood draws parallels between Islam and Marxism, noting how both systems rely on control over language and ideology to suppress opposition. The Quran's doctrine of abrogation, where earlier verses are replaced by contradictory later ones, epitomizes this inconsistency. For example, peaceful verses from Muhammad's early Meccan period are superseded by violent commands from his later Medina period. This fluidity allows Islamic leaders to adapt their rhetoric to suit their immediate goals, often at the cost of truth and integrity. Dr. Wood's critique reveals the inherent contradictions in Islamic theology, where the pursuit of dominance takes precedence over the pursuit of truth. This is evident in both the Quran's inconsistencies and Islam's historical trajectory of conquest and suppression. Conclusion. A cult of conquest, not faith. The Islamic claim to Palestine, and Jerusalem in particular, is emblematic of a broader pattern of opportunism and domination. By borrowing and distorting the religious narratives of others, Islam positions itself as the final authority while erasing the unique spiritual heritage of its predecessors. Its territorial ambitions, cloaked in religious justification, betray a system more concerned with power than with faith. Dr. David Wood's arguments provide a critical lens through which to understand these dynamics, exposing Islam as an ideology that prioritizes submission and control over freedom and truth. Far from being a religion of peace, Islam's history and theology reveal it to be a force of conquest and cultural erasure, incompatible with the pluralistic and democratic ideals it claims to respect. To recognize these truths is not an act of intolerance but of intellectual honesty. Only by confronting the uncomfortable realities of Islamic history and theology can we begin to address the challenges it poses to freedom, coexistence, and genuine spiritual understanding. May peace and prosperity be with you. Thank you for watching this presentation. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share my videos and channel to everyone you believe will appreciate such serendipitously informative content.